Welcome to my podcast. I'm Manjit Kaur Ruprai and I'm a narcissistic abuse recovery therapist. This podcast series is about telling the stories of victims of narcissistic abuse who have sent me their stories to share anonymously to make their voices heard. If you have a story you would like to tell about you, contact me via my website. This is a story about a woman who contacted me to share her story. Her name has been changed to protect her identity and whoever else I may mention. I'm going to call her Vivian and her husband Luca. Vivian sits down with a cup of tea and a biscuit and shares her story with me. I could not help but see the sadness and betrayal in her expression. She had spent 35 years with the man she had given her heart and soul to. She could not have given him any more than she already had. Vivian looks back at her high school years where her love story began. She thought he was the one and only. Their journey began during lunch where Vivian accidentally spilt a drink over Lucas's lunch. Amidst the chaos of the bustling canteen, their eyes met for the first time, and Luca had a little glint in his eyes and a smile. It was from there that Vivian felt something beautiful was about to begin. After that first encounter, she noticed that he was in some of her classes, but she hadn't noticed him before. Weeks turned into months, and they found themselves spending more and more time together. They spent countless hours talking about their hopes and dreams, sharing their fears and insecurities, and slowly but surely, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. As high school was coming to an end, Vivian couldn't help but feel uncertain of what the future held. Luca had his ambitions, and Vivian had her goals and dreams she wanted to fulfill. They reached adulthood and were separated by distance because they were going to different universities. But they made promises to one another that they had love for each other no matter where life took them. Luca was Vivian's first love, and he meant everything to her. Tears fill her eyes as she tells me her story. Never could she have imagined life without him. Never could she imagine what he did to her. Years later, they reconnected after finishing university, and they started the next chapter of their lives together. She looks back and was so happy in the beginning, but then things changed as they settled more into adulthood and responsibilities grew. Now she often questions whether Luca really loved her. Years into their marriage, Vivian and Luca had 2 children, and they provided them with a good life. She developed a medical condition after the children were born, but she is thankful she is able to manage this and lead a good life. Vivian looks back and scans the memories in her head and realizes that things were never good between them. Even in high school, Luca would become jealous, be dismissive and abrupt, and put her down at times. She loved him. She was young and didn't think much of it at the time, but she now sees Luca for what he is. She should have recognized these red flags back then. She reflects back and she sees things much clearer. Although she is shocked with the outcome, deep down she always thought of Luca as an egoist. He always put himself first and would tell her stories about himself and his family, and she now wonders if any of them were even true. Luca grew up in a difficult family, and his parents constantly argued. His parents broke up and didn't talk for years, but they lived in the same household. Perhaps Luca didn't know how to handle small conflict to big conflict, as he had seen this in his own parents. Whenever Vivian and Luca had conflict, he didn't know how to handle this, and she always found herself apologizing, and Luca never did. Often she would apologize for things she hadn't even done. She felt sorry for Luca because of his background. so she always made the first step to reconcile. Vivian couldn't stand quarrelling, and she just wanted to be happy and loved. It never mattered to her to win an argument, but somehow it was very important for Luca. When Vivian told him that winning is not everything, love is, he would come back to say, "You are the one who talks about winning, so you care about being a winner." Luca always had a way to twist an argument and project the blame onto her. He always had a need to be right about everything. 35 years they had been together, and he has never admitted a mistake despite him being wrong. Whenever Vivian brought up any conflict, he accused her of being stuck in the past. She had endless discussions with him, lying, twisting subjects, turning everything small into a serious issue. When she saw other couples and friends were able to resolve conflict and make up and kiss each other goodnight, she saw this was not happening in her own marriage. There were countless times Vivian cried herself to sleep while she watched his back in bed, sleeping soundly. There was one good thing that had not changed. They had a good sex life, enthusiastic and experimental, but somehow it was never enough for him. Luca would be smiling for 2 days after having sex, but after the 3rd day he would behave cold and angry. This left Vivian wondering what she had done wrong. Vivian felt obliged to be his sex partner constantly, and it was as if she couldn't be tired or simply not up to it all the time. Luca would often say she is useless if she wasn't up for having sex. If she declined intimacy, he would make her believe that he was liked by other women. This made Vivian feel insecure and conscious and alert that he could cheat on her at any time. Vivian noticed Luca engage a lot in social media, following and liking pictures of models of very pretty women. If she raised her concerns, Luca would blame her for being jealous. Whenever Vivian posted a nice picture of herself on social media, he would go crazy and blame her for cheating. Over the years, Luca had managed to manipulate Vivian to give control of all the finances, but she found he used this as a power tool. Vivian is from a wealthy family, and whatever they had accomplished in the 35 years was from her inheritance, the shops, the rental home, the houses, etc. She didn't want him to feel bad about her wealthy family, so she labelled everything as ours. Luca was not afraid to splash out, buying an expensive car, but she was blamed for being reckless with money. Even if she brought flowers for their garden, she was called reckless and accused of wasting money. Luca would give her the silent treatment for days or weeks for stupid things, making her wonder if she had done something so serious. Over time, Luca stopped liking Vivian's parents, her brother and friends. At times he would demand that she should not speak to her parents, but every time they needed their financial support, he would have no problem to approach them. It was the same with Luca's dad. Luca didn't speak to his dad for years, but he had no problem to love and care for him when he needed his money. Vivian only found out about this until years later. Luca really didn't want to know of every penny she was making, but he kept a secret of everything he had. Things carried on for years and years in this cycle of abuse and up and down, but things took a turn a few years ago during the pandemic. Vivian never imagined her situation to be this bad. During the pandemic, Luca's business had to close down as it took a hit. He suggested they sell their house as he was in debt. Somehow he paid only a portion of this debt, and the rest he managed to put on Vivian with several manipulations behind her back, as she found out years later. The day the buyer came to give them the down payment, Luca pretended to be sick and asked Vivian to meet with the buyer, so she got a signature on the initial agreement. Luca manipulated this and accused her of selling the house, as it was her signature. She couldn't believe his level of manipulation. Vivian also had a business which was very, very successful and popular. She had 2 shops and 2 franchises. Luca was unsupportive of this at first, but always kept the door open just in case she was successful and he could make money out of her. She tried to involve him, but he wasn't interested. In these years of Vivian building success and a future for them with her successful shops, she feels she lost him. It was like he was present but also absent at the same time. The growth of the shops were all her success. He did nothing to help her. In 2016, she was offered an opportunity by an investor to open a branch in another country. She took the opportunity and opened the first shop outside of Italy in 2016. This complicated project was all on Vivian, as Luca offered no support. The design, legalities, employees, the suppliers, which at times was a big struggle. As a family, they decided to relocate to where the new shop was, leaving Italy behind. Their son was at university at the time, so they all moved to where the new shop was, and it was also convenient for their son to have support. She feels Luca took full advantage of the new shop, as it was very successful, and he always wanted to move from Italy. Vivian believes that at the time Luca loved her, but she is unsure. She feels she laid the red carpet out for him, so he could feel proud that he was the clever Italian who moved the business to another country, even though he had not contributed. The shop was very successful, but Luca got into a big disagreement with the investors who owned 51% of the business. Luca was stubborn, and despite Vivian telling him to compromise with the investors, he spent so much money on lawyers to only lose the shop. The investors even made a great offer to buy them out, but Luca was stubborn and he refused to settle even though they had the money to do this. Even their parents were offering to help, but he was stubborn and refused to budge. Despite Vivian trying to be rational and tried her best to get Luca to understand, his stubbornness destroyed everything in the end, and he came to no compromise. The shop that Vivian had worked so hard on was lost, all because of Luca and his refusal to settle. It is so frustrating. These kind of people would rather see everything burned to the ground than to think with logic. Vivian saw all of her hard work collapse and the struggle she went through burned to the ground. Her shop was lost. This is so frustrating and so sad. Meanwhile, Luca also had Vivian convinced to close all of her other shops in Italy. She had sold them and had given the money along with some more money that she got from her 2 franchises. This was been the biggest regret of her entire life. Vivian feels shame. All of her hard work and years of dedication were gone, and they were left without the shops, without jobs. The success they had built was gone and crumbled to the ground. Actually, she built the success and Luca was just in on the ride. Luca took all of her efforts and discarded everything she made. She feels sick and used. Instead of Vivian holding Luca responsible, Do you know what she did? Have a guess. She found another shop and she asked her dad for some help with the building and financial support, because the new story from Luca was that there was no more money. Everything was spent in the dispute with the partners. Thanks to his poor decisions, she had to once again rely on her parents. Vivian later found out that Luca got a nice sum of money from his dad, but never told her. But he was happy for them to take it from her parents. Vivian's dad has been amazing in her journey, and he agreed to help them. He even worked on refurbishing the shop. The only thing Vivian's dad asked Luca to do was to make sure that the ownership of the new shop would be divided equally between Vivian, Luca, and their 2 children. Luca gave him his word of honor. Of course, he never did it. Do you know what he did instead? He kept 51% for himself, and the next day he started acting like Vivian's boss. She felt stuck, but never could she imagine what was about to happen next. Vivian developed a passion for writing stories for children. Her hero was a young girl. I can't tell you who her hero is, otherwise it will break her identity. But Vivian is a very, very talented woman. Vivian wrote around 40 stories about her hero, and every story had a theme with her business. Vivian had an idea to naming her shop with the name of her hero. She also had the idea of selling her books in the shop, along with other accessories. Vivian put this idea into practice, and everything turned out amazing, and the shop was a hit. Things were finally settling down, despite the rocky marriage. Then the pandemic came, and things took a turn again. Vivian had an offer from a book publishing company, which was an honour. Of course, Luca got very jealous of her books and the success of this. He began to blame her that she's not paying attention to the shop. This was a lie. All she did was dedicate her time to the shops. She only had to spend a small amount of time on the books. The shop was running and was taken care of by itself. Their sons were very proud and supportive of Vivian, and she felt happy. But the turning point was when she saw pure evil. Luca fired her from her own shop, and this is when she realised he owned 51% of the business. She did not know before this and had trusted Luca that he would honour his word that the business would be 50-50. She had nowhere to go. He had thrown her out and had all financial control. He locked her out of their one apartment in Italy, so she couldn't go back there either, but he asked his mum to do it so she could be blamed. He took her credit cards and he started spying on her through cyber stalking. He locked her out of their house and claimed that he was paying for her food and bed. He even had the audacity to start a smear campaign and calling common friends that she had abandoned them. Luca was texting Vivian not to come back to him, as he had found someone new, but she found out that this was a lie. Their sons tried to talk some sense into their dad, but he wasn't having any of it. Vivian tried to reconcile many times, but each time he was getting worse and worse. He was the first to seek advice from lawyers while she was trying to make up with him. It seemed that whatever triggered him had no point of return. Vivian pleaded with him and explained and wrote so many letters to him. She tried to show him how much she cares, how much she was there for the shop and the family, but he didn't listen to anything. It felt like she was talking to another person. They are now at the point where he kept the shop for himself, and he doesn't give anyone access to how the shop is doing, and that includes their children. He is keeping all the money he makes from Vivian's business idea, her struggles, her dad's money, and he had the nerve to leave her out. He even renewed the lease of the shop in his name only. He has left her with no income and the responsibility to pay off all of his previous debt in Italy. He even had the audacity to call a publisher to say that Vivian is lying and that he is the founder of her shop. He has proceeded to make up so many lies and that she had nothing to do with the business. There are now court proceedings. Vivian is confident that she can prove them in court and that this was entirely her business concept, as she has rights to the brand. Luca is not afraid of Vivian taking him to court because he made sure that she has no money to do so. So clever. She knows he plotted this all along. Luca has even been on media and has talked about the shops like as though she was never there, saying things like he created the shop and that he is the owner. After being pushed by their sons to come to an agreement with Vivian, he offered to give us some shares of the shop, but under the condition that he gets a percentage of her books and her family's inheritance. Can you believe that? This is disgraceful. So disgraceful. It is like he is enjoying playing with Vivian and making offers that she knows she will refuse. These are all mind games and manipulations. Vivian is full of grief. She never imagined she would be left out of the life she made when they moved from Italy. She is away from her sons and she has no place to stay where they moved together as a family from Italy. She is away from her job, her life and business she spent more than half of her life building. Vivian's sons have settled down and are with their girlfriends, have good jobs. They're grown-ups now, but she only gets to see them 10 to 15 days every year. Vivian has their old summer house in Italy and she lives close to her parents. Thankfully, she found some of her old friends and she has a support network, but she is deeply hurt. She ruminates and keeps asking herself why she wasn't loved. During the marriage, she was accused of all the mistakes, explaining, apologizing, but this did not save them. He keeps repeating the twisted story that suits his image as a victim. Despite Luca doing everything to discard Vivian, he claims that she left him. Vivian still cherishes some romantic memories about who she thought he was for years. She supported him on everything and was faithful and a good wife. She was successful and he fed off her success. She was brought up to be a hard worker and to grab success, whereas Luca had no idea what to do with his life. It was Vivian's brother who supported Luca in opening his own shop. He now hates her brother as well. Vivian realizes that Luca only cares and thinks about himself. He uses people for their advantage and then discards them. He has always been jealous of Vivian. He stole everything from her and he resented that she was the brains of the success. She feels used and discarded and like he doesn't need her anymore. He just discards everyone. She was seeing Luca do this to everyone, but she never thought that he would do this to her. Thank you for sharing your story, Vivian. I wish you all the best and that things work out for you. I want you to know that you are an amazing and talented, strong woman. Please like and share. If you have a story to tell, email me via my website. Thank you for tuning into this episode.